records. Just say on your screen if it's recording.
Yes,
okay,
it does.
All right, perfect. Okay, well, hello, comrades and friends, and hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of 1+1, your place for inconvenient truth-telling and myth-busting. And we are joined today with Darrah Teitel. Darrah is a Canadian feminist playwright of a Jewish background. And in this All Things Canada edition, we're going to talk about, well, we are going to talk about Israel and Palestine and, Zionism and anti-Zionism. But we're also going to talk about feminism and the world of art. And all right, we're going to get straight right into it. But first of all, Darrah, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for wanting to chat.
Well, I wanted to talk to well, again, it's a real honor to have you, and I wanted to talk to you because you had a because your organization, I think Jewish Voice for Peace in Canada, I think that's the name of the organization, right? Or
it's called Independent Jewish Voices.
Yes, and yeah, Independent Jewish Voices hosted an online event with a past guest of mine, Jackie Walker, who was I was a young reporter for an independent outlet called Black Agenda Report, covering the Labour Party conference, and I got to spend a lot of time basically being, embedded with, Jackie, Chris Williamson, Tony Greenstein, and so many Jewish socialist, anti-Zionist, and social justice, anti-imperialist voices who, ironically, were slandered as anti-Semites and tarred and feather in the corporate press and even the left-leaning press in the UK. So I spent a good time with her, and she was one of my first guests, a two-parter on the program, and it was great to see her performing her one-woman show, and of course the conversation that you were having with Jackie in between. So that's why I really wanted to have you on, and I think I even remember posting my saying this is a great event on on Twitter, and then you started following me on on Twitter. So I thought, okay, finally, good, I can get her on the show.
How cool!
Exactly.
Yeah, Jack, that was such a fun time for me. It's like you were saying, Jewish socialist playwright, like these are my people. So.
Exactly. So the first question I wanted to ask you then is so my first question is, you have been described, and I believe you do describe yourself as a feminist playwright. So briefly, if it's even possible, what to you is feminism, and what are some of the everyday sexisms that you notice still exists, and that maybe you yourself have experienced personally, just in everyday life, and then even in the in the world of playwrights? Because I know with Me Too, there's been a lot of there's been a lot of attention on men abusing their powers in the film world and in the music world, and is that the case in some of the theater worlds that you've experienced or that you've observed from people confiding in you, going, oh geez, patriarchy is still very robust throughout Canada, including in our own worlds?
Yeah, I mean, definitely patriarchy is robust in everywhere. I would say that I describe myself as a feminist playwright often because the subject of my plays, ever since I was a very young child, were really concerned with gender and sexuality, transgressive gender, transgressive sexuality, and justice in regards to all of that stuff. And ever since I was very little, the questions of feminism have really obsessed me. And I was also a very young child being brought out into like activist spaces, and a lot of my activism comes through the feminist movement. My mom was a member of like the early women's health movement in Canada. She was sort of like a renegade midwife before it was legal, and that was just sort of how I grew up as an activist. It brought me into protest spaces. It brought me into all kinds of places that I otherwise wouldn't have had access to. And I've also, as a child playwright, I had my first play produced when I was 11. And these were just the things, it's kind of like Simone de Beauvoir, who spent all of her time in, hobnobbing with existentialist philosophers. But then when she approached the question of her own gender, she got stuck, because how could she be approaching any other question other than her right to exist as an equal human being? So she becomes a feminist philosopher instead of just an existentialist philosopher. So, I'm many things. I'm a socialist, I'm anti-capitalist, I'm anti-Zionist, a health advocate, reproductive rights advocate. But if I had to choose one word to sort of like encapsulate where I sit inside of political movements, I would say I'm a feminist. And feminism gets a lot of shit.
Exactly. I was actually just about to interject. Say, I was going to jokingly say, why men should not. Why men should not be afraid of feminism. So, in other words, I was actually going to ask you, well, what to you is feminism then? Because, anywho, go right ahead.
I mean, feminism is just, for me, like everything. It's really, it has very little to do with just women for me these days in many ways. It's sort of just the way in which I feel like we need to, it's like, I see the world as having a giant beast in this, like, running the show. And there's like the heteropatriarchy. It's a three-headed beast. There's the heteropatriarchy, there's like colonial imperialism, and there's white supremacy. And then the body of the beast is capitalism, right?
Yeah.
And where I have done the most work personally, where I have the most background and where I have the most sort of like personal stake and investment, is in sort of like destroying the heteropatriarchy. But these things are so intertwined and interconnected, and they depend so strongly, and our struggles for liberation are so entwined that like it's impossible just to, say I'm a feminist at the expense of fighting against white supremacy, or I'm a feminist at the expense of looking at decolonization or anything like that, right? So,
yeah,
and really, I do believe as a socialist that the body of the beast is capitalism, and that if we don't strike a body blow and really address like working class struggles, then we're going to get absolutely nowhere with the other identity politics crap. So
then a quick follow-up then, do you reject this very unhealthy debate that's going on in the left between identity politics versus the class struggle? Why do you reject that, and how would you kill two birds with one stone, or teach people to chew gum and walk at the same time? That it does not have to be one or the other of fighting institutional classism, which I call crapitalism. And of course, women's liberation, queer liberation, racial justice for Black and Indigenous people, and immigrant rights and
exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
People power,
For sure. Yeah, I mean, you said it best, like you can chew gum and walk at the same time, but also like that rift in and of itself, that split, is in and of itself capitalist, right? Like that is a corporate capitalist environment convincing people that that poverty isn't a huge part of what is keeping anybody from any identitarian background in chains in so many ways, right? So like capitalism wins when we turn against our working class folks and neighbors, and then it allows like the queer republicanism and like Black head of states who are totally
the Black misleadership class, as Black Agenda Report would call them. Yeah,
exactly. And Margaret Thatcher, who you don't vote for her just because she has a vagina, and so it's all a sham, right? And I think it's a big problem here where I live in Toronto. I think that socialism in Canada is weak. Like I'm trying to fix it really hard. I'm part of an organization called Courage, which is
I'm familiar
growing
with
and
that
growing and growing.
organization. Interesting.
Oh, that's so exciting. Because
Yeah.
I was one of the founding members, and we just began it like 5 years ago, right? And but to date, we are still kind of like one of the largest, if not the largest socialist organization in Canada. And we're striving to be sort of like a bit of a DSA in Canada, or do a bit of a momentum thing, even though I know momentum's having a lot of problems right now, and we're probably going to have them as well in our future, but we're more in our infancy. And yeah, the ID politics stuff gets in the way of us. And the worst part of it is that, of course, it comes with these accusations of racism. Like, if you're not totally focused, if you're trying to reject an ID politics frame of reference as an activist, then you can be accused of racism, or you can be accused of homophobia, or accused of sexism. Yeah, it's just a totally non-intersectional way of looking at things.
Well, that's very interesting. I think we're definitely going to even return to that. And very briefly, then, as a playwright and as someone who has actually had their work performed, I just have to ask, as a feminist, do you think that there is a lot of sexism in our media? And I'm a big fan of both rap and rock music, and both of those types of music, metal music, hard rock music, and rap music, have often been accused of glorifying violent masculinity and machismo, and engaging in a lot of misogyny. And I just wanted your opinion on that. Do you think that our pop culture does glorify sexism, and the bad boys, and the girls should be going for the bad boys, as opposed to a softy skinny loser such as myself and whatnot? And
so this is mostly about you getting laid, right?
Well, it's just funny how that. Before, I used to be very defensive, about people when they would say that about rap music or even rock music. Although, looking back, I think of the fact that there is violence at rock concerts, at punk concerts, the whole mosh pitting and so forth. So musicians can't say that oh no, we don't glorify violence, we don't encourage our audience to do that. But then you do have something like a mosh pit, and you do have a lot of sexist language and so forth. So there is some some truth to that. So as a feminist, and as a person who's a playwright, and of course there's the issue that there's not a lot of female playwrights, not female directors, and not even and even a lot of sexist double standards in a lot of cinema and TV shows. So your thoughts on that?
God, that's a lot. I don't even know where to start, but I don't know a lot about music industry. I have 2 little kids, and I'm exhausted all the time. So if I get to listen to music, I'm winning. But it's definitely not something I'm an expert on. I love rap, and I love rock, and I like the harsher side of both of those music forms.
Me too. Yep.
Because they express a kind of primal rage that I feel, and do so brilliantly with the most incredible lyricism in the world. And I think that the rawness of the kind of feminist anti-oppression voices that come through rap and rock are so rad that who cares if other people are being assholes, right? Those forms of art have enabled some of the most explosive voices in my head when I personally create art and get to listen to music for my 10 minutes a day or something, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not the kind of slut shaming, whorephobic feminist that thinks that female sexuality, depictions of female sexuality are akin to misogyny, right? for me, as
Interesting.
well
Okay.
as well as in my writing, you know, like I have a lot of like rough sexual content in what I do, and a lot of sexuality is like approached in my work, and it's not all pleasant, and it's not all, but if the characters are real, if the voice is authentic, if the circumstances are written from the brain of a person who I hope isn't a misogynist, if I can talk about misogyny and internalized misogyny, and you know how completely screwed up the world is for girls and for women, and you know and so many other people, then I believe that the art I put out won't be bad, right? And who cares what the politic is? Like the politic I have to think about last. The authenticity of it is what I need to be centering my focus on. And in doing that, like the stuff that I create might offend some feminists. In fact, I know it does. I had quick anecdote, like when I was first starting to create, I was like in a high school, and a queer older teacher in my high school who had a theater company of her own, like a feminist theater company. She kind of recognized me. She's like, "Oh, you're like a little baby queer feminist, and I want to support you because you know, are very self-important and you're clearly." And so she gave me a small grant to make my first real play, right? And I did this whole weird teenage sexual assault version of Miss Julie, and she saw it and she hated it. She was like, "I don't see how this is feminist." And I was like, "I don't know, lady, but it kind of turns me on, and it's what I needed to make." and it was just a complete like generational divide between like her sort of like liberal feminism of just trying to like, you know, desexualize the female body, and my sort of third wave feminism, completely different, you know. Like my mom and I read the same copy of like a Leonard Cohen novel, which is basically just about a young man like fucking his way through Montreal. And I see her like, you know, 20-year-old's notes where she's identifying with the women characters, and then I'm writing in the margins identifying with the dude. So like we're in totally different wavelengths, but the way we assert our sexuality is both part of the same feminist project, right?
But then I have to ask, this is actually one of the prepared written questions, but then I have to ask, yeah, what do you think then of all of these, you know, female artists? And it could be someone like Beyonce and Miley Cyrus and Cardi B, who I personally think show their show their female anatomies too much, which I think distracts from the music that they're trying to do. And you know, I know in the beginning it was interesting when Madonna kind of, you know, pushed, you know, the limits and depicted her raw sexuality with her, you know, in the beginning of her career, and of course with the Erotica album. But nowadays, I just find that there's too much sexual images and titillating images coming out of the music industry, and it's kind of you know, interesting how we have so many fantastic female artists, which I won't name off the top of my head, even though I did, you know, type them all up. But yeah, but I just find that there is way too too much of the kind of like, stripping and showing off the being scantily dressed and all of that. And do you find that distracts from that distracts from the music, or there's nothing, you know, sort of anti-feminist about, what they're doing? Well, yeah,
I mean, there absolutely could be something anti-feminist going on there, right? And people shouldn't have to like show their tits and ass in order to sell. But also, like, I ask, are these women in control of their bodies? Do they have agency? Do they have bodily sovereignty? Are they communicating the message that they want to communicate? And if the answer to that question is yes, then what they're doing is not anti-feminist, in my opinion. feminism is, for me at least, about like agency and choice and bodily sovereignty. And then, that's the baseline that like, makes us all human, right? Like, do we have free choices in our lives? Yes, if we're Black or women or queers or what have you. And then beyond that, like, who am I to tell another person, beyond just being a reader or like an observer of their art, which is what you're basically saying. You're like, that's too much for my taste. Mm-hmm. That distracts me from what I want to hear inside of this person's art. But that's a different, but me saying I don't like your art, or like I'm not receiving it the way, like I dislike what you're doing, is different than me saying what you're doing is wrong, or what you're doing is anti-feminism, or what you're doing is like politically problematic. And so like I told you, like I don't know very much about the music industry, and I don't know very much music, right? Like I'm probably still listening to like the same shit I listened to in the 90s and 2000s. So
no problem. I'm still listening to a lot of music from that period, but even the 1930s and 40s. So yeah, so
absolutely.
No problem.
So like I'm not the person to ask like what Cardi B and Beyonce did yesterday, but like I do, whatever those women kind of like, especially Beyonce, like she's a freaking queen of the industry, right? Like I'm sure she has the agency and the money to do whatever the fuck she wants. Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on your show.
Go right ahead. Yeah. It's all right.
And I wish people like that would take more of an interest outside of just identity politics and into more class politics. I wish they would use some of their influence to sort of talk about, the billionaire class, or at least expose that they're part of that billionaire class when they are, like Beyonce is. That's why I would like Beyonce probably, but not because she shows her naked body.
So then, do you respectfully disagree with an artist I really like, Paloma Faith, when she says Beyonce and to anyone else, put your clothes on. You don't have to be a feminist, and take it all off. Like, do you respectfully disagree with Paloma Faith on that comments?
I haven't read the comments in context, so I don't want to directly say yes or no to what she said. But I would definitely never quarrel with any woman who wants to take her clothes off in public. If she's not being coerced to do that, and I'm not saying she isn't being coerced to do that, because there can be coercion in many, many ways, and they can be very subtle, and they can seem like agency when it isn't. And when I read art and I see like even the subtlest breach of an actor's agency on stage or screen, I'm really like attuned to that sort of thing. Or if I see it in the rehearsal hall, that happens a lot, right? Like you'll see an actor who's in just a position of no power compared to the director, compared to like the fact that she needs this gig so bad. And she can be pushed into doing things with her body or things with the role itself that she doesn't want to do that. And she's not in control of it, and she doesn't feel powerful in that moment. And it is exploited of her body, and that shit is totally unacceptable in my opinion, right?
Yeah.
But then you get things where the actor is in total control and do whatever you want with your body. It's yours, Yeah.
Oh, interesting. And then I have to ask this before we talk about your experience at the NTP and Israel and Palestine. Then, so I have to ask I have to ask this question, because you mentioned that you don't see women who go in sex work or stripping as being anti-feminist, as some feminists think it is. So that being said, are you of the opinion that that something such as pornography actually can be art, and that it's not all smut peddling and exploiting of women's bodies or anyone's bodies for the time being? And I know Larry Flint, free speech advocate, recently passed away. So what's your position on that then? Because some people, and I actually even include me, think that a lot of the images we see on like MTV and so forth, and with these female artists showing off their bodies, leaving none to the imagination, as basically being soft pornography. And why should porn be like, this bad apple? But all that stuff on MTV, which all of our little cousins and nephews and so forth get much more easy access to than, say, the CD world of porn. I mean, isn't that soft pornography compared to,
maybe, but I also don't think that pornography is a bad apple, and I don't think that sex work is a bad apple.
Okay.
I think we all live inside of this economy, and we all live inside of a system of patriarchy, and the things that turn us on or off are not entirely inside of our control to. And so long as we do live inside of like a cis hetero patriarchy and like a capitalist economy, there's going to be things that are politically incorrect that turn us on. And people have the right to find pleasure in this world. And as long as people aren't being exploited or harmed, they're allowed to get off on what gets them off, in my opinion. So like, I loved watching these when I was a little girl, like what you're describing as softcore porn, because it put me in touch with my sexuality and it taught me a bit about what turns me on or off. And I want my kids to grow into sex positive people. So I don't try and shelter them from bodies or sexuality as much as I can. I'm not trying to traumatize them, right? And when it comes to consent and issues of sexual assault and rape, like gender equality and, queer positivity, it's so important that I infuse those sexuality imagery with those lessons for my kids. But my kids know a lot about sex, and I want them to always feel that they have a right to pleasure, not just that they have, that they should sort of like feel weird about naked bodies. So.
Sounds to me like you and me, we need to be on the board of a lot of those media companies. I think we'd be able to reform and find a good balance then.
Totally. Sorry, I just lost my earpiece.
Sure, no problem.
This is sexist. They always make these earpieces too big for my ears.
Alrighty then.
My slender female ears.
Alrighty then. Okay, you know what? Let's because we have very limited time. Let's already get into this question then, which is, talk to us about. I think you already did talk to us about your background, but if you'd like to add more, talk to us about your Jewish background and the fact you're of a Judeo background, but you don't support ultra Zionism. And I believe you don't subscribe to a form of Zionism, and you're obviously part of an organization which speaks out against the brutal subjugation and the colonial project in Palestine. And so my question is, can you talk about how difficult that is to be a Jewish person and not support what Israel does in your name and in the name of your community and the global Jewish population?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very Jewish. I was raised in a very traditional Jewish home, and my grandparents met while fighting in the 1948 war. They're Arabs themselves. My grandmother is Libyan, born from Tunisia. And
okay, interesting.
And yeah, which is so interesting, of course, because she's definitely the most Zionist person on earth, or was. She actually passed away very recently. And so her own Arab Israeli identity is a very interesting and
she would be called forgive me if I got this wrong, but she would be considered a Sephardi Jew or Ashkenazi?
She's Sephardic.
So Sephardic Jews are those from an Arab background.
She's from background. Exactly. She's from North Africa.
Yeah.
So Sephardic and Mizrahi. And so that kind of like, interracial play has always been present in my life. And I was raised to be unquestioningly Zionist, and I went to a Hebrew day school. But simultaneously, that Hebrew day school also taught me a lot of lessons of Torah and Talmud and Jewish history of persecution, which is utterly obsessive around ethics and what is questions of the right way to live, what is a moral way of existence. And I am somebody who is really, really tuned into those questions of justice. And when I was in first year university, I think, was also when the second Intifada began. And it was the first time that I had Palestinian friends who were in my dormitory. And it, one night, me and my new Palestinian friend stayed up all night long talking in the common room of that university dormitory about what his grandparents' experiences were in Israel and what my grandparents' experiences were in Israel. And I would say that was kind of like a very formative moment for me, because it completely blew my mind in terms of the histories that I've taught. And I, started reading Edward Said, and I went on a long journey of re-education for myself. But what I would say is that, and that required me to have some very difficult conversations with my family again and again and again. I don't really confront my grandparents' generation, because for them, Israel was survival, and they are entitled to that narrative because it's true. They're on one side Holocaust survivors, and on the other side, people who would be dead if it were not for the state of Israel. But for my parents, I'm kind of like constantly in a bit of a deadlock with them. And then I have a ton of family who is in Israel right now. And they're from all sides of the political spectrum. Some of them are extremely secular and extremely left-wing, and others are extremely religious. They're Sephardic on one side and Ashkenaz on the other side. And they're just all over the map in terms of what they do and how they live in that country. The ones that I'm closest to, you'll obviously not be surprised to hear, the ones who are very left-wing and deeply involved in Arab rights within Israel, and trying really hard within whatever capacity they have as Israelis to fight against Netanyahu and his, fascistic system. And right now, when I speak to them or text them, they are horrifically depressed and just have no faith.
I have. Sorry to interject, but I also share with them that depression. So yeah.
Yeah, just no faith, no. I think my aunts recently texted me, "Israel is dead." And I said, "Well, do you want to leave? Like, you want to come here?" And she was like, "I can't. It's my home. I have nowhere else to go." And she's like, "But it's dead. There's nothing more to say. There's nothing more to work for. There's nothing more to hope for." So that was very depressing to hear, because she's one of the people who, does activism there. So for her not to see any hope was really shattering. Anyhow, yeah, that said, though, as soon as I started to enter into the world of the Jewish left and to the world of people who were fighting for justice in Palestine and Israel, I started to notice that lots of us are Jews, almost all of the people that I was reading from an anti-Zionist perspective were critical of Judaism are also Jewish. And so I really reject this kind of but you're a Jew dynamic, because there are so many Jewish allies and so many Jewish people who are invested in peace in the Middle East, right?
Yeah.
And so to say that it's an anomalous thing that I be Jewish and also not support an apartheid state, that isn't true to my circles of people. And just the fact that so many of those humans have, I think a lot of them would say that they have complicated relationships to their Judaism, and I try and urge them not to hate their own Judaism and still to hold the politics that they have. Because I love the fact that I'm Jewish, and I love my Judaism, and I'm a proud Jew, and I'm practicing and I'm religious. And I'm strong enough and supported enough to come up against some political foes everywhere I go, not just in my Jewish circles. Jews, right? So we can do this as Jews, not as people who are like hate the fact that we're Jewish because Jews are doing fucked up shitty things in Israel, you know?
Yeah. That's really interesting and very, very fascinating. And now, you're a member of the New Democratic Party, and there was recently a conference. Talk to us about the stunning Palestine justice victory. Jewish Voice for Peace in Canada, and others in the Palestine justice movement within the NDP achieved during this year's conference, which all had to be online due to the ongoing coronavirus crisis.
Yeah. So this was a pandemic convention for the NDP, and it was a policy convention. So we do these every couple of years. The New Democrat Party is, the left party in Canada. We have sort of a big three-party system, unlike the States. So it's more left than the Democrats, and more left than whatever the Labour Party is, give or take some Corbyn. But
no, it's true. It's true. It's very true. I often get people criticizing the NDP on my show. I'm even a critic of the NDP.
Oh, I am too.
But it is. Exactly. Well, I even had Barry Wise letter. Yeah, I even had Barry Wise letter of Socialist Action Canada and a member of the NDP Socialist Caucus, and I asked him about all of the federal leaders, and he had a criticism for all of them. But it is true that the NDP.
That's Barry.
Yeah, but it is true that the NDP certainly Bernie Sanders and Jeremy Corbyn would find a home in the NDP as opposed to the Democrats and the Labour Party. So yeah, continue with what you're saying.
Yeah, that's a very good way of putting it. And that's why we criticize it so strongly, right? Because if it professes leftism, then it best be properly left, right? And so I would say that I can't take credit for the motion that was passed, for the resolution that was passed. It wasn't my baby at all. It is something that I definitely supported, and when I was tapped to kind of organize around it through Courage but one of my best friends is one of the authors of the resolution. His name's Omar Bergen, and it was just a stunning victory for him, something that took a ton of organizing on the ground. And it really was just like a couple of Palestinian and Jewish allies who got together and they organized the crap out of it. They spoke to academics, they got endorsements from faith groups, from churches, from labor unions, from organizations like Courage. They roped in IJV, and the resolution itself is the first resolution that has proper sanctions, that's in a federal party's policy book. And so it's not toothless, it makes a lot of sense, and it really calls out the hypocrisy of what countries like Canada are doing right now, where they give sort of like this lip service admonishment of the ongoing status quo violence that happens in Israel, while simultaneously selling them arms and supporting it financially without, shamelessly, right? So it's completely toothless, this sort of virtue signaling, slap on the wrist, if they get that at all. And really what the Liberal government, what Trudeau's government has done right now is continue Harper's, fully Zionist, pro-Israel, pro-Netanyahu policies to the T, really, without any. And he does that on everything. This isn't anomalous. Like, he does that on Israel, and he does that on the environment. He does that on every issue that we pretend to care about. He does sometimes he does a little virtue signaling nod through what he says in one way, but they are all Harper's policies, essentially.
He is a gaslighter. He is the white Obama.
Yeah, no, he's the worst. Gosh, I hate liberals.
Me too. Me too.
Anyhow, let's not digress there.
Exactly.
This is about the NDP, and now this is part of their policy books. And I think one of the most stunning, amazing things was that the fact that when the vote was called, and I think that there were people in the background trying really hard to prevent the vote from happening, like there were party hacks who didn't want the resolution to come to the floor. Yeah. And that was really upsetting to watch that happen. they're just staffers who are like put there to draw out into an insane degree the resolution before, so that the natural democracy of the party couldn't put that resolution on the floor as it had prioritized to do. But that aside, it came to the floor. One person spoke to it from our side, and that was my friend Omar, and he spoke well. And then the vote was called, and 85% of the convention voted in favor of the resolution, which should just be the biggest sign to the NDP and to Parliament at large of where the general public is at on these issues, right? And they specifically didn't want to do a resolution that was going to be difficult to support. They wanted to do something that would be effective, and it is effective. Sanctions are effective, but not like so egregiously over the top that people would get uncomfortable with the language and that politicians would fear putting their name behind it. So they put something out there that was easy to support, and they got it passed with 85% of the majority base of their party. And I think that should show Parliament that when they do things that are just like, oh, well, hedging it on Israel-Palestine, and really it's a two-sided issue and we are very impartial, but that's not where people are at. And that sign in and of itself is so valuable. So even if the party does nothing with that policy, which I don't have a lot of hope that they will, after the media moment, and there was a good media moment around it. And I'm really happy about that. But even if it never comes to fruition, it's there, it's on the record, it shows where their people are at, it shows where the base is at, and it shows what we're sort of feeling even in the Jewish community, like that the majority of younger Jews are not accepting Israel blindly. And for behemoth organizations like CJA and B'nai B'rith, who are wildly conservative, to be professing that they speak on behalf of the Jews of Canada is false. That's just not true. So, and the organization that I work with, Independent Jewish Voices, did some polling recently that showed how few younger Jews support, an apartheid state in Israel. And the results were great. So, like bashing those myths that, you're going to lose all Jewish voters, or that Jews do not have a stake in this, or that, by being blindly Zionist, or that you're somehow doing a favor for the Jewish community, I think is really important.
Well, congratulations.
And I'm incredibly proud of my friends who did this. I can't take credit.
You should be. You should be. So, congratulations, and that's a great victory, especially given what happened to Jeremy. What happened to the Corbyn project and what's happening in France and throughout Europe.
That's a whole other thing. The IRA definition is like,
but the NDP has not signed up to the IHRA definition, right?
Not yet. I mean, I went to personally with some IJV folks to lobby Jagmeet Singh about against falling into that trap. And I mean, he's the smart guy. He seemed to understand it, but I don't know. He gave us no assurances in either direction. It is frightening to take on what Corbyn took on, and to sort of see that like his entire mandate was destroyed on this question, right? So like I get why Jagmeet is afraid, and he should be afraid. But sticking his head in the sand is not going to help, in my opinion. And taking a principled stance on this is really, I think, the only way to keep his face with him. So we'll see what happens.
That leads to this. That leads to this question then, which is, you mentioned that you're, that you're, Israel, that you're Israeli, that the Israelis who are against the ultra-Zionist state of Israel and speak out on Israel, both your family and friends in Israel who do that, don't have any hope anymore in the state of Israel. So I have to ask. So I have to ask this question, which is, what hope is there for a just peace in Israel? And because we still have this issue, clearly you as a member of the NDP know about this issue of those who are progressive on everything except Palestine, or those who are regressive on everything, especially Palestine. And given that Israel is never penalized for its crimes against humanity, and that most heads of state of the Five Eyes Alliance and NATO EU members reject a democratic one-state solution, and given the fact that we talked about him, Jeremy Corbyn didn't call bullshit to the anti-Semitism, slander that was leveled at him, and your comrade, my friend Jackie Walker, and countless other Jewish anti-Zionist voices, Jewish socialist, anti-racist, anti-imperialist voices were all slandered as anti-Semites, and Jeremy Corbyn and his entire leadership team threw them under the bus, didn't call BS, said there's an anti-Semitism crisis, we're dealing with it, and then of course the Corbyn Project was eviscerated. So so for you, what hope is there, especially because you're a member of of a party which still seems to have to be kicking and screaming into guys, speak out against speak out against Israel. And it's not just the NDP, the Green Party also has also has that has that issue.
I mean, they all will, because siege is so scary and neighborhood is so terrifying. And that threat is real. I've had a lot of comrades and friends be blacklisted, and their careers have been harmed, and their reputations have been hurt, and so the threat is real. Like, these guys are thugs, and they're shameless, and they are supported by the alt-right, which is powerful. Where you're taking on the entire right-wing behemoth, bajillion-dollared asshat, everybody, when you take on Palestine. And some politicians will very reasonably say, well, that's just going to distract from our ability to govern anyway, right? But what is just? What is morality, right? Anyhow, you asked me about hope, and maybe this is sort of the last thing that we'll talk about, because I have to go put my little son to sleep. And I actually spoke to my friend Omar about this question of hope, and he said that South Africa gives him hope, because they had, when they did have their transition from apartheid, they had a peaceful and beautiful transition out of apartheid into something else, and it happened after many, many, many decades of activism, right? And so this might not happen tomorrow in Palestine, but he sees that there will be a time when Israel is decolonized. And I think that's a beautiful thought. I find it difficult to imagine a time when Israeli Jews are going to be okay, or at least humble to the idea that there not be a Jewish homeland. And that's how they'll see it. I don't see it that way. I think that there will be a one state, hopefully in the just future, and that what we need to be talking about in defense of that one state solution and in preparation for that is notions of equality. We need to be not saying that it'll become a Palestinian state or majority Arab or blah, 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 or will come and destroy the idea of a Jewish homeland, but that it will be a state of equality for all people, including Jews. And so when I'm trying to find hope, I cling to this notion that people, both Jewish and Arab and young and old, can get behind an idea of equality, of like equal citizenship, of like, just getting sick to the tits of like not wanting to be thought of as like racist and oppressive. I don't think young people in Israel are okay with what's going on, but they also are really apathetic. So maybe if we can start a campaign, and I am a campaigner, right? Like, that's my profession, it's my job. I campaign around ideas of like equality more than peace almost, then maybe we can get some folks on side. Like, use that identity politics garbage, right? Like, you don't want to be a racist? Great, equality, one state.
Well, Ms.Teitel, before your son takes over the room, I have to ask this very quick question there, so you can give, and don't worry, it'll be very quick.
Sure.
James Lipton passed away last year, who was my, hero, the guy who hosted Inside the Actors Studio. And as a
Mm.
tribute as a tribute to him, and as a tribute to playwrights such as herself, I have to ask you the questionnaire he always asks at the end of his show. So here it goes, and it'll be very quick. So, what is your favorite words?
Oh, my favorite words. Oh, darn, I'm not prepared for this. Oh gosh. I think my dramaturgs would say that my favorite word is the F word, and they try and take it out of all.
It's also my favorite word, actually.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I love so many words. Words are incredible. Oh, I wish I'd been prepared for this question. Get back to me. I'll think about it.
Okay. What is your okay? What was your least favorite? What's your
Oh.
least favorite word?
Oh, my least favorite word. Nice. I hate the word
Okay.
nice.
What turns you on? Not sexually, but what inspires you and and turns you on?
Um, when the healing power of art gets me every time,
Okay.
and also the brilliance of children, like watching my son say the most incredible things.
Awesome. What turns you off?
Oh, boredom. Boredom and niceness. I think apathy. Apathy really turns me off.
Okay.
Things that are just acceptance of the status quo, unquestioningly acceptance.
I completely agree with you on that. What sound or noise do you love?
I love the sound of my babies laughing,
Okay.
obviously, and I love the sound of the French horn. Actually, it really does it.
That is a damn good one. What sound or noise
Mm.
do you hate?
The sound of my baby crying, and actually,
Love it when he's happy, but hate that sound when he's upset, right?
of course, I'm like a mom. I mean, he's a baby, so he screams and I freak out. And I also really hate the sound of motorcycles on the street. I hate
I also hate that sound as well. What is your favorite curse word?
Yeah, it's got to be fuck. I say
Okay.
the word fuck a lot.
Okay. What profession, if you didn't have your own, would you love to do?
Travel agent. I love finding cheap flights all over the world, even though I know it's bad for the environment. But travel is awesome. I love fantasizing about other people traveling, and I'm really cheap too. I really like to like find like really affordable ways for people to travel. Yeah, I think I would be a really excited travel agent. But that profession doesn't exist anymore, sadly.
If heaven exists, it's the last question. If
Mm.
heaven exists, what would you like God to say to you as you arrive at the pearly gates?
Oh, um, it would, I don't know, something like your grandmother's waiting right there. Or here's your grandparents, you miss them, go say hi.
Fantastic. On this, on this much shorter edition of 1+1, because Darrah is a mother and she needs to give her room back to her son, and it is a Sunday night. So Ms.Teitel, Darrah, thank you so much for joining me today. I really hope this will be the first of many conversations, because there's so much I want to talk to you about, feminism and so much more. And I also wanted to talk to you about, real legitimate anti-Semitism and so forth, and how to combat
Mm,
it. But we're going to save that for another time. I look forward to us
sure
keeping in
thing.
touch. And thank you so much for joining me today. This was a wonderful conversation, and I look forward to many more.
It's my pleasure. Thanks, Youri.
Power to the
Bye.
people, death to the fascist pigs.